County Service Authority Board of Directors. I hereby invoke the rules and procedures previously adopted by the Board of Supervisors and the King George County Board of Directors of the Service Authority, allowing for electronic participation by some members with a quorum physically present. This action is taken as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the governor's orders regarding limiting of gatherings and staying in place during a disaster. Electronic participation is encouraged, and pursuant to the governor's emergency orders, a maximum of 10 people will be allowed to be physically present. If you choose to be physically present, you will be screened by authorized staff for signs and symptoms of illness. Based on the results of that screening, certain physical attendees may be denied entry. The following members are physically present: Mr. Jim Morris, our Vice Chairman, Ms. Annie Kupka, and Chairwoman Kathy Binder. And online, we have Mr. Parker. Can you certify that you're attending remotely?
Alan Parker, attending remotely.
And Mr. Bennett? Mr. Bennett?
Mike Bennett attending remotely.
Those members are participating through electronic and remote meetings and have notified the chair that temporary disabilities and or other medical conditions exist that prevent the members' physical attendance. I direct the clerk to include this statement and the statement of remotely participating board members to be memorialized in the minutes. We'll now move for everybody could please stand in the invocation by Mr. Bennett, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Mr. Weekly.
Dear God, we thank you for this opportunity to serve. We ask you to be with us tonight, give us wisdom, and help us to make good decisions for our customers in King George County. Amen.
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 I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Mr. Weekly, do we have any amendments to the agenda?
Madam Chair, if I could just interrupt Mr. Weekly. That, I'll update the thing you read, but we are not holding it to 10 people. That's the old one in the statement, if the clerk could correct it. We do have social distancing, and that is from the very first phase 1. So anyone can attend as long as we can maintain social distancing.
Thank you, Mr. Britton. I forgot I was reading off the old copy. Thank you.
Madam Chair, we have no amendments to the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Weekly. Now, next up is public comment. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person in order to afford everyone an opportunity to speak. If comments relate to a specific public hearing item, we ask that you offer those comments at the time of the public hearing. Is there anybody who would like to speak in public comment? We have no one online, Mr. Dines? Do we have any other correspondence from any board member? All right, we'll move on to reports from members of the board. Mr. Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one thing real quickly. I got an email just earlier today from Sharon Crock, the engineer for Naval Engineering in King George County, regarding the Fairview Beach Riverbank Stabilization Plan. And finally, FEMA has published the environmental assessment. So that is due for 30 days public comment, and by August 10th, that will be the end of the public comment period. So slow progress, but some progress at least. That's all I have now.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Mr. Parker.
No report, ma'am.
Thank you. Mr. Morris.
No report, ma'am.
Ms. Kupka.
Yes, ma'am. I have just one item. Saturday, June 27th, I attended the Fairview Beach Town Hall. Thank you to Mr. Bush, the James Monroe District Supervisor, for hosting the town hall, and Mr. Mike Bennett for organizing it on behalf of the Fairview Beach Residents Association. While we were aware that Muni billing charges a convenience fee for customers who pay via credit card, several customers that day brought to our attention the fact that when customers pay via electronic funds transfer, Muni billing charges a 60-cent convenience fee. I want to thank Mr. Weekly for contacting Muni billing regarding the matter for me. Just to inform our customers, the best way to avoid the 60-cent convenient fee is to set up your payment through your bank's online banking service, which most banks offer free to their customers. That is all.
Thank you, Ms. Kupka. I have no report at this time. We'll move on to, can I have a motion on the consent agenda?
Move that we approve the consent agenda.
Do I have a second? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Chair votes aye, motion carries. Next up is a report from the county attorney, Hopyard Farms, Section 16, deed of dedication. Mr. Britton.
Yes, Madam Chair, this is a deed of dedication, subdivision dedication, vacation, and easement. Ms. Hall is here. If there are any specific questions, I reviewed it. Mr. Weekly's reviewed it, as well as Ms. Hall for accuracy of all of the required dedications, both to the service authority and to the county as we hit the milestones. I believe this is 16. And these are accurate, all of the citations. I know one mistake was caught on the landing. I think it was Potomac Landing instead of Hopyard Landing the last time we caught that. We went through this with a fine-tooth comb, both here in the Service Authority and the county. So now that I said that, I hope you didn't find something wrong with it, but it is in legal order. And I would recommend that the board vote on whether to approve and accept the dedication for the Hopyard. I have the original here.
Thank you, Mr. Britton. Do we have a motion for accepting the Hopyard Farm Section 16 deed of dedication?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. Next up,
Madam Chair, I'll hand this up when at the board meeting, which we'll have the same motion and you'll still be the chair.
okay, thank you so much, Mr. Britton. Next up is delinquent accounts. Mr. Britton, you again.
Thank you. Madam Chair, when I took a look at the various accounts that the county has, that we collect both taxes and what have you. By the way, I've handed out a report. I'm not sure if Mr. Weekly disseminated that. Yeah, thank you. Handed out a report on it. And as you can see, the county has, as you know, from being on the Board of Supervisors side, various accounts which it collects, both through taxation as well as other fees and costs. Those are copious and various amongst the various agencies, treasurer, the commissioner of revenue, zoning. There's all sorts of costs that get collected through the county. It's mainly tax ordinances. As it relates, though, to the service authority, the code allows also for delinquent accounts and collections to be collected by the county on behalf of any of its boards, committees, and agencies, of which this is one. And so we will be presenting to the board this same packet of information, requesting that they pass an ordinance allowing such collection with a 20% fee imposed upon the delinquent account holder, which then makes the delinquent accounts collected at zero impact, fiscal impact to the county. There's no cost. It's very similar to the courthouse security fee. A convicted, a person who's originally accused of a crime, a defendant, if they're convicted, then they have to pay what's now a $10 fee. I'll be recommending that you advertise an ordinance for a $20 fee, and that makes it a zero impact on the county and presumably funds those services of collection on the backs of the people who should have paid to begin with, absent some bona fide justification or excuse. So the issue that we did was I did a survey, and I found out that at any given time on the county side, there's about 100 accounts that may come in and out of delinquency, and that's run through the treasurer's office. So she, the person who handles that was very pleased that we would be getting this amalgamated into one point of light, one point of contact where everybody could go to say, how can we do collections? How can we send the letters out in a respectful and legal fashion? How can we receive the money and account for it? And for those people who simply cannot be found or do not wish to be found or do not wish to pay when they are found, then on a very rare occasion can also go to court. So as a result of that, I undertook to look around the folks that I've been aware of through the Commonwealth who do that. One of the people who did that is Jeff Sharps with tax. They've got about 100 folks working for them. They represent 80 other jurisdictions, including Spotsylvania and Westmoreland in one capacity or another, regarding various accounts. So I am going to be recommending to the Board of Supervisors that the Board of Supervisors advertise an ordinance and authorize the signing of the contract. One great thing about tax is they're on the Bright system, which is the system we're on. So literally, they, upon authorization, can just get into that account, and they do everything from beginning to end. Everything goes through one. As to the county attorney's office, obviously, I'm authorized to do it by law, but 100 lawsuits or 100 collection actions. If you didn't have this organization or an organization like it doing it, I think certainly you could ask the treasurer's office, they would need someone. And I think you certainly could ask Mr. Weekly, he would need someone. Coming full circle back to the service authority, there are currently over 500 delinquent accounts ranging in the approximately $200,000 to $300,000 in uncollected fees. So the fiscal impact on this is high, and it's important, especially in light of running the service authority and straightening out the finances to the extent possible. People should be, paying a fair fee for a fair service rendered, and that's all that they do. So I know Mr. Scharf and his colleagues who run this tax. We've met with them. I invited Mr. Weekly into the meeting because he has by far and away the greatest number at any given time because of the nature of the business and because of some other things that he may wish to address. The treasurer representative was there and the commissioner of revenue was there. Everybody was very impressed and asked me, please put this forward to the county and see if we can get this through. Currently, we're doing it on a piecemeal basis on the very delinquent folks on sales and use, meals tax, things like that, which can also be crimes because you accept, for instance, sales and use tax on behalf of the Commonwealth as a fiduciary. And if you don't turn it over, that was actually never your money. So a lot of those go through the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. But as you can imagine, they're not on the Bright system that I know of, and it's not integrated with the county. And the point is not to charge someone with a crime. The point is to keep up on collections. So those are the very, very few, maybe 10 a year. And so we'll get all of them. Vehicle, unpaid vehicle taxes, people who register their vehicles in different states and live here, all that stuff will go under tax or a firm like it. I wouldn't normally have taken the service authority's time. I would have just gone to the Board of Supervisors. However, I spoke with Jonathan. He was in the meeting. I think he was impressed. He can speak for himself. Asked to do this, but because the optic is 500 plus on the service authority and currently less than 10 for the county, and maybe in the less than 50 total if you include all the treasurers, I thought that it would be good to present it now so that y'all knew what was happening on the county side as it progressed to the ordinance, the signing of the contract. Last thing, great news, because they're on Bright, they have a less than 5 working day uptick. They will be handling all of our accounts in less than 5 working days from signing the contract. And there's no cost, as I said, to the county or the service authority.
Do we have to make a motion for this or is this just discussion item?
No, Madam Chair. It's just the Board of Supervisors that would make a motion to advertise the ordinance, and only that is for the 20%. Otherwise, they would take their fee out of what was owed to the county, and we don't, or the service authority. So no, there's no motion necessary. It was an information item, but I wanted to just give a background on the county. I think Mr. Weekly had a couple of comments as well.
Go ahead, Mr. Weekly.
Can everybody hear me? There we go. So I want to thank Mr. Britton for bringing this company to my attention. One of the things I shared with him, something I get now is called an aging report. And we get that every time billing goes out now through this company. And it was just mind-boggling. I don't know if we can call it divine intervention or not, but I got the report. Matt called, said, hey, I have this company. I'd like for you to come check it out. We can't operate in the red. We realize folks may struggle from time to time, but it was alarming. Our threshold, I think, in delinquencies and our regulations may mention anything over $25. I'm not saying we take people to court for $25, but they can quickly escalate. So as Matt just mentioned, we're over 500 counts. That's unacceptable. And I think we're near $230,000, and that's just in the 60 to 89 days past due. It's not uncommon somebody maybe run a little bit of a balance in 30 days because we bill bi-monthly, but however, things can compound quickly. So I have reached out to a few customers on that list, some that might be commercial accounts, to try to, let's work through this. It's on our radar. You have an opportunity, and we want to say it to all the customers, you have an opportunity to let's just have a dialogue. We do have some payment plan options, but when you get up to higher amounts, at some point, the rubber has to meet the road. So again, I think it's a win-win. It's a no-brainer on my part, but I'd highly recommend this. Again, we cannot afford to operate in the red. We have tight budgets, and it's not fair to the folks who are actually paying for that service. So I'm highly on board with it. And again, I thank Mr. Britton for bringing this company to my attention.
Thank you, Mr. Weekly. Does anybody have any questions? Go ahead, Ms. Kupka.
Sorry about that. I just want to reiterate what Mr. Weekly said. Thank you, Mr. Britton, for bringing this to our attention. And Mr. Weekly, can I assume when customers are delinquent, does interest continue to accrue on those payments, on those late charges, beyond the late fee?
Give me one. Here we go. I'm on. Sorry, I'm going through technical stuff down here. So anything that was prior the local emergency declaration, which actually you all approved the amendments to the regulations. So right now, anything new would not. Anything prior, obviously that was prior to that declaration. So that would be on their accounts. One thing I wanted to also mention, I spoke with Muni and Bill about this because we would just have to, and it's nothing but a module or connection point between software programs. But we had a conference call with them the other day. While we're still tied to Bright in a way where we have to account for our revenues, the posting of our billing. So we would just have to get that access point if you move forward with tax with this account. It's not a problem. They would set up that, I'm gonna call it a back door for them to go in for these accounts. So again, we gotta collect. I think you all have done tremendous strides in approving, for the local state of emergency. We're not trying to pile on, but a lot of this was prior to the COVID, but good question. So right now during COVID, no interest. Anything prior is another matter.
Right, so why I asked that specifically is then that 20% statutory fee would be added to the delinquent bill. And so this, if we properly advertise this, once the Board of Supervisors, if we do adopt this, then if we do some advertising to our customers, perhaps that would be an incredible incentive to get them to square up their accounts before this goes into effect, because then that's going to be another 20% tacked on to their bill. So
tracking that's a very good point. I'd be happy to do some advertising, kind of like folks do with their back taxes or so forth like that. We'd be happy to do an advertising campaign of, hey, we do have payment plans. Just call us. Let's have a conversation. We got to stay within the confinements because you got to treat customer A as you do customer B and customer C and so forth. But I'd be happy to do that. I'm tracking that to put out some type of advertisement. The 20%, as Matt just mentioned, that's on top, so we would collect everything in full, but now is the time, you know, folks, we want folks to do right. We don't want disparaging feelings out there for our customers. You know, everybody might have a reason of why they got to where they got, but we just want folks to do the right thing. We'll stay within the guidelines on any payment plan options, but I'd be happy if that's the board's direction to have an advertisement kind of campaign of, hey, you know, payment plans do exist. If you are past due accounts, you know, please contact the service authority. So if that's the request and the board so seeks, we can definitely put out advertisement.
And I note in here, in this information you all provided, that tax also has its own payment plan mechanism set up as well, Mr. Britton.
Madam Chair, if I may, they do everything. I mean, they're Jonathan can direct his folks to reach out the first time, the first 200 times, but tax really does everything. They're professionals. They know how to do it. They know the difference between a habitual offender and a one-time. They know the difference between a scofflaw and somebody who made a mistake. And they really are professional, and they handle this. The other thing, Ms. Kupka, is you are for sure correct. Where a county has like a bad check program where they dismiss the check if you pay it on the day of court, that people are writing bad checks all over that county. But as soon as the prosecutor and the sheriff's office and police enforce that law, because bad check is larceny in Virginia, it stops. It gets around. It gets around in the jail. It gets around in the community, and it gets around amongst the business. So there's its own advertising as well. And I'm sure there's just some folks out there. I'm not saying there are, but I'm sure that with 550 people, there's some people saying, "Hey, nobody ever comes to collect my bill." So that hopefully would be something that folks will be looking at. And when I saw that happen when I was Commonwealth Attorney, I saw that happen. We went from 100 bad checks a month to 12 a year.
Thank you very much for answering that.
Do we have any other questions? Mr. Bennett, Mr. Parker? All right. Thank you, Mr. Britton. I really appreciate that. Sounds like a good program. Mr. Weekly, next up is presentations and reports.
There are no presentations or reports, Madam Chair.
Do we have any action items or discussion items?
No, Madam Chair.
All right, next up is the general manager's report.
I'll wait, Mr. Dines is going to load that up for you all. Okay, next slide, please, Chris. Go back a slide, please. You went through. All right, here's some general water information. So a lot of this is just, you know, informational purposes. We are required every year for our waterworks systems to provide a consumer confidence report. I had reported to the board before. We were going to try the electronic method. We felt maybe that we were running out of time to do it this year. However, and I'll give kudos to Ms. Norris Barker, she worked on this with a local company. I got approval through the resident engineer, through the VDH office, and as long as there was a link, a hyperlink they wanted to take directly to the site, we can do this. Kudos to Mr. Dines. He was able to get those documents online, put that link. I tested it all out. I sent that over to VDH, got their approval. So for those who are customers who are also board members, and for customers who are listening or watching at home, if you still want a hard copy, call in, we'll get you one. This was trying to cut down on some of the mailing costs because VDH did allow for an electronic method. However, if there are folks that request the mailing, we are required by law to keep a list of those, and then the following year, those folks on that list, we would mail them hard copies. So we have started compiling that list, but still there's going to be a savings in the future. So that was the reason for it. We're not hiding information from people. We're trying to be more efficient. A lot of even the state agencies have gone paperless, so we're trying to do our part as well and be cost efficient. Next, under water information, Nine's well rehab work is scheduled to begin July 27th. So we've been able to identify some equipment to rehab non's-will, such as hydro tanks and a used storage tank. And I'll say, while it may be the word used, it still meets all criteria. It passes VDH standards. So we're not putting something online that's dilapidated and past use. But by doing this, it's going to be a tremendous savings. I plan on bringing back to the board once that project's been complete, and we're kind of having to do it in phases. It's going to be a huge saving. I had earlier on, we were looking at anywhere between $200,000 to $300,000. We had an engineering firm look at it, and their cost estimates were just under $1 million. And there's not $1 million worth of work out there at Nines. No offense for the 36 wonderful connections we have on that system. That's just entirely too high. So I believe you're going to like the favorability of the project. So I'll collect all that data. What I'm tracking, it should be under 60 grand, but it has to be a piecemeal. It's a tight footprint for number one, so you can't do everything at one time, not all the tanks, and some of it we're securing from different areas. But that is scheduled July 27th, so I'll be glad when that's completed. Some of the work we're going to do ourselves. We have a temporary tank set up right now. We've already pulled the back T samples. The idea is to have that tank to keep the system up and running while the other tanks are being repaired or, replaced. We used this tank during the Oakland Park water tower recoding, and we actually procured that tank from a contractor. We got a real good deal on it. I think it was like $9,500 or just under that last year. So the idea was to use that as a mobile setup if need be, and wouldn't you know it, we're in a need be situation. So we're pretty excited within that. While yes, it's not a new building or all the new shiny stuff, it's going to be work in order, but it's also going to be respectful of our budget. Lastly, on the general water information, I like to give kudos to staff when they're out there trying to do things in-house, as we should do as much as possible. They've been doing some new fencing, taking down some old or putting up, and putting up new. So Canterbury has some new fencing, and the two well yards out at Hop Yard Farms, well A and D, and we're just waiting for that material to dry out so we can come back and either stain or paint it. So just some efforts of staff I thought worth mentioning. Next slide, please. So some general wastewater information. Oakland Park, so as you may recall, around budget time, we programmed some monies in for 2 new blowers. So that IFB, I think it actually went out yesterday or today. That's not committing the board to any funds. We're allowed to do invitation for bids. However, once those come back, before anything's awarded, there will be discussion amongst the board. You will see the data, and then ultimately I will bring a recommendation for you all to approve that facility. We have some leased equipment out there right now, but we need long-term solutions. So that's what that IFB will be bringing us. Second item there, clarifier drives. That was some sad news, but we're going to need to overhaul. There's 2 clarifiers out at the Dahlgren Wastewater Treatment Plant. Right now in the process, we're working up towards a draft IFB for that. The goal would be to replace those drive units. So it's basically the motors and the gears that move the arms around. So when you come out to the site, it's going to make sense, but it's a big holding tank. It has some arms that function, but the drive units, and while we have the tank empty, we need to sandblast and recoat that. So there are companies that do that as a one-stop shop. That's generally not an in-house item for any locality, really. So once we have that together, we'll put out an IFB, and I'll have further information for the board to review and ultimately consider for approval. Item 3 is basically a safety item. It's not the complete plant at Perkins, but there are some areas that are unsafe. We keep personnel out of that area, but the catwalks, which is the area that you would normally walk on to get to different parts of the tank, collect samples or what have you. The steel is pretty bad shape. It's not actually going to support and hold the grading or anyone on top of it. So we have a fabricator coming out next week to make that safe. That area is currently roped off, and we need to make that safe. We've got to have safe work environment for our people. Next item, we received confirmation email from DEQ, and I emailed the board of directors right before I went on vacation. This was a good send-off, if you will. They have, in that email, they approved all the remaining SOPs and operation and maintenance manuals for all wastewater treatment plant facilities. What does that mean? Well, out of all the long list of consent order items, we have satisfied all except for one, that is the pump stations. We have put forward a plan for pump stations. DEQ has approved that plan. We are currently in priority 1, which are auto dialers and push to test functions, which have to be completed in 12 months or less. We will do that. We will deliver that. However, they have to amend the consent order, which basically closes out all those prior items and leave that one. So I don't have word yet when they will advertise it, but DEQ is required to advertise it. That's a public notice that they are looking to amend the consent order. So that's a good thing. Normally I would like to close these things out in 12 months or less. You don't want to have consent orders looming over your head. But as you may recall, pump stations and the amount of time, engineering, and construction dollars doesn't allow for a 12-month turnaround because we have over 30 pump stations in our inventory. So, but it is good news. We're tracking along everything we've been working on the past year and a half. So that was good news from DEQ. So when I'm aware of the revised consent order public notice, I will inform the board so you know if you read it in the paper what that's about. Next slide, please. So we're going to roll through some of the wastewater treatment plants. So please feel free to stop me if you have questions. So basically, I'm just going to let you know we are meeting criteria. We're doing very well nutrient-wise, and this was set up when I arrived. The board wanted to see this, and the understanding is now we would do this every quarter just so you understand where we're at on the year. So we're halfway through the calendar year, which is what DEQ goes by as far as your annual reporting, and we're doing very well at all 5 facilities. So the screen you have before you shows you the performance of Dahlgren. And when you're looking at these things, above I will always give you the annual limit, and below that is the year-to-date where we're at. So you can see we're tracking very well for Dahlgren. Next slide, please. Same thing, Fairview Beach. And I don't mean to just glance over these. You know, I've been applauding staff, you know, all the past couple weeks of this is their efforts and making sure we're meeting these permits. It's what we should do, but they've been very consistent, and I'm proud of that. Next slide, please.
Mr. Morse?
Oh, yes.
I'm sorry, back on the Dahlgren wastewater plant,
Okay.
under nitrogen, our annual limit is 3.
Yes, sir.
6 months into, we're at 1.9.
Yes, sir.
Does it look like we're gonna go over that 3?
No, we're tracking. I mean, I will tell you that 3 is a very tall order to meet, but that's a grant language, so we're tied into that. Even though the permit, actually, I believe they corrected this permit cycle, or they will the next permit cycle. The permit limit says 4, but the grant language, so when the service authority entered into the contract and they upgraded that facility, those were the limits they said they could meet. We are tracking well that we will meet that, but you will be between a 1.5 and a 2 on our monthly averages. So right now, if things continue month after month, and you don't see the month after month breakdown here, this is cumulative, but yes, sir, I feel confident. We stay on the same path, we will meet that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Good question. On to next slide, please, Chris. And good question too, Mr. Morris. A lot of our other plants, it's not that tight. I mean, that's a pretty low number out of all of our facilities, but again, we'll meet that. So Fairview Beach, you know, we're doing well. The slide you had before you, Hop Yarn Farms, again, no concerns there. Although you have a 1 milligram per liter total phosphorus annual, you do have to track that very closely because it doesn't take many higher results to kind of push that target number. But again, we're performing very well at that facility. Next slide. Perkins Corner, the plant we talked about last month. You know, considering the condition it's in, that plant is performing well. It does have a higher nutrient limit than most of our facilities. I think Oakland Park's the next, or is the highest out of all of our limits. But you can see we're tracking along about half of that, of both of those annual limits. So older technology is just that capacity is the main concern there. That and the overall condition of the equipment. So, but we're meeting limits. Next slide, please. Oakland Park, that has the highest limits. However, we don't try to push that threshold. So again, we're below half of the averages or the annual limits that are required there. Any questions on the nutrient tracking? Okay, next
I
slide,
like the
please.
numbers. They're much better than in the past.
Again, kudos to staff. You know, they're trying. They understand what compliance means outside of safety, which is my job to make sure they have that environment and the tools and the environment to work around. But they got a job to do. You know, when you hire staff to meet permanent limits, that's our job, and that's what we owe our customers too that pay that service. But thank you. I'll pass that along, Madam Chair, to staff. Here's some updates. So some of this is just end of the fiscal year, just so you know where we landed on some items. So total new connections for the year, the total was 85, and we have built into our financial projections in that 5-year rate model 50. We felt that was a safe number because you never know with the economy. But this is the breakdown of the 85 connections. 78 of those were residential, water and sewer, so those are full service connections. 4 were residential water only, and there were 3 water and sewer commercial customers. So ended pretty strong for FY 19-20. Again, you know, you got to build in some type of projection. We use 50. That was a number that our financial consultant recognized and staff agree with. But we had a very solid year. Last item was just an update. So the board, and I think this was prior to Mr. Britton coming on, Eric and myself brought this to you. We thought we had a good solid agreement with Sprint to locate equipment on our Monmouth Tower. It was a really good deal. However, before that contract was executed, they were going through a potential merger. Well, that merger between Sprint and T-Mobile happened. So the communication we got back was, well, we like that site, but that agreement, you know, they couldn't move through with it. So if and when, we hope it's when they come back, it'll have to be a new contract agreement that I will push over to Mr. Britton's office to let him review, and we'll negotiate like we did last time. So the good news is, well, there's not good news when you lose revenue, but the good news is we did not put that revenue in our budget. So it's not like we're going to not realize funds we budgeted for. So so we hope they come back around. So that was more of an update for the board. And that should conclude my report. Do we have any questions?
Do we have any questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Weekly. And I want to thank once again the Service Authority staff for their good work and the great numbers we see on the General Manager's report. And do we have a motion for adjournment?
I move to adjourn to August 4th, 2020 at 5:30 p.m. at King George High School.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Chair votes aye. This meeting is hereby adjourned to the next regularly scheduled meeting on August 4th, 2020 at King George High School. That meeting may be held by electronic means and remote participation only, and may be closed to the public being physically present. All citizens are encouraged to participate in advance or during the meeting by electronic means as provided by the county. This meeting is adjourned.